Hello, everybody. I'm John Glenn. Who will win the KRDO Triple Crown of Running? For the ladies, will it be Janie Day, who came in second last year, but has first-place finishes in the Garden of the Gods and the 10K Classic this year? And for the guys, will John Escabel be able to translate second-place finishes in the Garden of the Gods and the 10K Classic into a Triple Crown of Running championship? We'll find out next when KRDO brings you exclusive coverage of the 1988 Pikes Peak Marathon and Ascent. Hello, everybody, and welcome to KRDO's exclusive coverage of the Pikes Peak Marathon and Ascent. I'm John Glenn, and with us one more time is our expert color commentator, Rick Rojas. Rick, thanks for being with us tonight.
Good to be here, John.
All right, now this is one of the oldest marathons in the world and one of the most challenging courses in the world.
Yes, it is. I think this course is probably the most challenging course in the world as far as the marathon distance go. It starts flat for the first mile, and then through the French Creek at 9,000 feet, through Barr Camp at 10,000 feet, and the A-frame at 12,000 feet, finishing at about 14,000.
So you've got a 7,000-foot altitude gain. It's extremely difficult. We'll start off tonight's show with the ascent. A beautiful morning on Saturday morning. You couldn't ask for anything better. The sun coming right up about 7 o'clock in the morning. Beautiful 65 degrees at the base of the mountain, about 29 to 30 degrees up on top.
Again, the weather couldn't have been better. I think the Triple Crown this year has been blessed with fantastic weather.
You get some great shots there. We had 6 crews in the mountain on Saturday, all the way from the bottom all the way to the top. 6 crews doing an excellent job of giving us an idea of what this looks like. There you see the city of Manitou Springs, a nice pull-out all the way up to the top of Pikes Peak, 14,000 feet.
It's beautiful. Look at that shot of the peak up there.
We go from the top back down to the bottom the way it looks at the start. As I mentioned, it was about 65 degrees. We had about 1,500 runners at the start, so it was a good morning for running.
Yes, it was, and you can see it's a little bit brisk down here at the start, and there's some people warming up. There's a nice stretch shot right there, a man warming up. He's doing the right thing before a race like this.
Now, Rick, how important is it? You've got to about 13.4 miles straight up a mountain. How important is it to work out in the morning?
Well, as far as the warm-up goes in the morning, I think all you need to do is stretch a little bit. The first mile affords you a chance really to get warmed up on a flat before hitting the uphill.
Of course, there's a lot of runners in the pack here. They're stretching out a lot. They're getting stretched out because this is going to be a tough race, but one everybody is looking forward to.
Well, just from the altitude, it's going to be pretty tough. It's not easy to breathe once you get above like 10,000 feet. We took a ride up earlier in the day, and it was just very, very hard to breathe at high altitude.
I know it's going to be tough. I'm looking forward to it, though.
Yeah, I've been up the course. I've hiked up it before, and I don't think it's all that hard compared to running up another mountain in Colorado.
I don't know why I keep doing it. You get to timberline, you keep saying, I'll never do this again, I'll never do this again, and you come back.
Yeah, I love it. It's a wonderful thing to do every year. Look forward to it. I think it keeps you going.
Welcome back, everybody. You know, the Ascent race started out Saturday morning, 7 a.m. without a hitch. It was a great morning for a race.
It was beautiful, and the start was beautiful, too. The runners got off to a clean start. There were no bumping, no hassling. It was very nice.
You have 1,500 runners there, Rick. It's got to be congested when you're taking off on a race like this, especially when you're going over 13 miles up a mountain.
I think the key to a start in this is to really relax, make sure you don't jostle or bump the partner next to you, and just really relax for the first mile or so.
You mentioned the first mile or so. It's on cement, and they're going to go to a gravel mixture, then all of a sudden to a path format. What's that like running?
Most of the runners are used to running on a hard surface. I think the biggest thing they need to be aware of is making the transition from a hard surface to a nice soft surface.
Here we go through downtown Manitou. Of course, we've got Scott Elliott moving out very quickly with Walter Sargent hot on his heels. Is it smart to start out fast like that?
Not really. I think that he probably could have started off a lot slower and saved himself a little bit of energy for the first mile or so, because Sargent does catch him at the 3-mile point.
And here we're going up toward the Cog Railway and then on to Barr Trail. It's very interesting, in fact, he's already pulled out to maybe a good 10-second lead right there, and now he hits the dirt in the the gravel mixture, so it's got to be tough in this first couple of miles.
I think psychologically he wanted to do that. I think he wanted to be the first one to the trailhead and establish a lead going through the W curves.
Now for the pack runners, it's got to be difficult as well. You're going uphill almost immediately. You've got a short course in downtown Manitou Springs, but then immediately you're hitting a hill, and you notice here in the video, some of the people are actually walking up this path.
That's right, and that's not a bad idea, because what you want to do is save your running muscles and trade off between the walking and running muscles, give them a break.
Now, how much training do you need on something like this on a mountain? Do you have to have mountain training if you want to succeed at this race?
Absolutely. I think if you want to be in the top finishers in this race, you do have to spend some time on the mountain.
And the early going, especially here in the W's, the switchbacks early on, it gets quite congested. Here we see the top three runners, Scott Elliott, Walter Sargent, and Michael Tobin, and they've all got about a 2-second lead on each other, so it's kind of congested right here.
Already, you'll notice that they've already eaten up Scott. They've caught up to him after about 2.5 miles here. So actually the first lead that he had in the first mile of the race didn't do him that much good.
You can see the rest of the 1,500 runners here in a second once they go past the switchback right here. It's very congested. The runners actually slow down to a crawl. Psychologically, does that bother them because they may think this is actually a running marathon?
Yes, I think it might to a certain extent. I think if you hadn't had experience in the course before and all of a sudden you find yourself walking, then it can be very discouraging. Most of these people are very well experienced in the course, though.
You saw 4 and 5 there. Brent Friest was in 4th right there. But the pack runners are coming up. It was a beautiful morning there. You see downtown Manitou Springs, a nice pullout by one of our crews. It was a nice morning. It was hot at the bottom. It got kind of cool the closer you got to the top. And there, of course, is our lead female right there. It's kind of tough being the lead female right here, especially when you haven't run this course many times.
That's right. Barbie is actually from sea level. She lives here in Colorado Springs, but she did get off to a very fast start, and that really is a lack of experience. She started off a little bit too fast and catches up to her later on.
There's Janie Day sitting back in 4th place right now. She's kind of taking her time. She's run this so many times, she knows her strategy to a T.
That's right, and Janie was very deliberate, very slow to start off with, and that was a very good strategy on her part.
There you see the runners, or make that the walkers, it should say at this point. You also mentioned to me before, several runners there have backpacks on their hind ends to give them some nourishment on the way up.
We call those fanny packs.
Okay, here's Barr Camp. It's the major water stop for the area. There you see Walter Sargent overtaking the #1 position. He is #1 now, followed by Scott Elliott in #2 and Michael Tobin in #3. And as we mentioned, Barr Camp is a major water stop. How did the water get there? We have to say thank you to Fort Carson. Moving 2,000 gallons of water up Pikes Peak is not an easy task. That is, unless you're Fort Carson's A Company of the 158th Aviation. They volunteered to airlift the water up the mountain using a Chinook helicopter.
It just wouldn't be possible to do it any other way except for sling loading under a Chinook. And that's just one of the things we have here, a big asset and a real good resource that we can afford to use.
This crew's mission was clear. Drop 6 shipments of water bottles on 3 sites in the peak. Sound complicated?
This is a relatively easy mission. It's light load. The only problem is the altitude. But, you know, we're capable of carrying 26,000 pounds, and these are less than 2,000 each. So this is really no problem. We're going to take up 2 nets at a time. We could do that, but the problem is you're going to bounce together and break the bottles. We're going to take, so we decided to take 1 net at a time, do 6 trips up. That'd be about it.
Without the help of Fort Carson, the marathon directors would have had to haul the water using pack animals or pack people. That would have taken more time and resources, which Fort Carson provided for free.
The way we could afford that kind of support, according to the U.S. military, running something like it's about $7 grand an hour. Needless to say, that our support from the U.S. Army is tremendous, and we really appreciate it.
And so do the runners.
It's real valuable. You know, without the water, you couldn't finish. Well, you could probably get up. You could probably go 10 miles without much water, but after that, it becomes a survival test.
As you can tell, water is very important if these athletes want to make it all the way to the top of Pikes Peak. We'll take a water break right now. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back, everybody. We'll pick up the ascent race at the Cirque, which is about 13,000 feet high, and it's 11.5 miles into the race. And of course, the last time we saw Scott Elliott, he was in 2nd at Barr Camp. Now he's overtaken. He's back in #1 with a big lead over Walter Sargent.
It's interesting here because they were neck and neck coming out of the Barr Camp, and he's opened up a couple hundred meters at this point.
You see the water station. It's interesting that Scott actually stops there cold turkey almost and gets a glass of water.
Not a bad idea, because what it does is it gives your legs a chance to take a little break, and you can just kind of catch your breath.
You see him looking at his watch there. He told me after the race he really wanted to keep track of his time because he wants that Triple Crown of Running title. Right now he's in good shape to win it.
That's right. It's interesting because he's not so much concerned about Sargent as he is about John Escobel. He wants to know where John is.
There's Walter Sargent. Speaking of Walter, he looks a little stiff right there. You can see by the anguish on his face that he's hurting. In fact, he's leaning forward almost as if he wants to get this thing over with very quickly.
That's right. You can see he's hunched over a little bit there. His stride is not that strong at this point. He's really struggling.
And the Kazoo players are there. A great shot by our camera crew showing the distance between number 1 and number 2. You saw Sargent there, and there is Elliott, who has almost a 30 to 40 second lead right now.
Yeah, you have to remember that Scotty has spent the last 2 weeks up here on the Barr Trail and really familiarizing himself with his course.
And there's Sargent you see going behind the rock, then Elliott coming back out on at least 2 trails higher. So you see he's got at least a 40-second lead right there, and he's looking a lot stronger than Sargent.
Well, I tell you have to give a lot of credit to Sargent.
There's number 3, Michael Tobin. Has a little better stride right now. Looks a little bit stronger than Sargent does, but then again, Sargent has that big lead.
Tactically, Sargent ran a very smart race, running head-to-head with Scotty through the Barr Camp.
There's number 4, Brent Friest, who's looking pretty strong right there. We'll come back down. This is John Escobel coming up. The fans are cheering him on. Of course, he is the Triple Crown leader going into this event, but he's struggling right now. You can see that his arms aren't moving very fast. His legs aren't going up very high, so you can tell he's hurting.
That's right. This course really blesses the mountain runners. He is not truly a mountain runner. He really does this in addition to his flatline racing. So he is not well prepared for this particular course.
And he's leaning forward. It's got to be a hard sign. It's got to be hard in the small of his back. It also has to be hard on his legs because he's actually leaning forward on the mountain.
That's right. And right now his legs are screaming for oxygen. He hasn't been up to this altitude recently. You can see right here he's cutting his stride. He'll use his hand to push off the rock. There he goes right there.
There's not much oxygen, as we mentioned, so these runners have to work very hard. You can see there's the 6th place runner. The pack runners, by the time they get up here, the oxygen level is going to be hard on them. You can imagine what it is on the elite runners that are running very fast.
That's right. You lose about 3% every 1,000 feet you go up. It's like driving a car up the peak. It gets weaker and weaker as you go up.
Here's a good shot of the rest of the leaders going back up the top. You can tell the distance they're going straight up here. We mentioned earlier that right about Barr Camp, it kind of levels out. You get a little bit of a break, but there's no break right here. These guys are going almost straight up a mountain.
That's right, and there's a lot of race walking involved here. Actually, it's more efficient at 10, 12, 14,000 feet to race walk than it is actually to run.
And speaking of race walking, they're actually doing that right here. It's a lot more efficient. You get better time. And here's the lead woman, Lynn Brown, now is in good shape. She looks almost happy when she goes past her cruise.
It's amazing because the women tend to pace themselves a little bit better than the men do, and they tend to smile and say hello to the crowd, wave to the crowd. They're very content at this level.
Here's Janie Day, who's made up a lot of time. Last time we saw Janie, she was in 4th or 5th place. Now she is in 2nd and looking quite strong.
Yes, she really ran a very smart tactical race. You could see at the beginning she started off very slow and really worked herself into the race here.
And she's run it so many times that she actually has a good idea of what she's doing. As opposed to the pack runners you're seeing right here, the distance you can see, they've got to be a little bit frustrated now because they are in a solid line. They can't move very fast, but maybe again they don't want to move very fast.
They're looking very good, though, still.
Here's a great shot of the Cirque, the bottom of the Cirque. We're going to go all the way back up to the top. It's a great shot by our camera crew, but not a very good position to be in if you're trying to run up a mountain.
There's a lot of work there involved at this elevation.
There's 16 golden stairs. You're starting to get back up, and look at the guy way up there. That's John Escobel. He is hurting definitely. He's not used to running these mountains, and it takes an awful lot of energy to run a mountain like this. And where does the energy come from? Well, it comes from good nutrition.
If there's one way these runners can possibly cut a corner to the top, it just might be through nutrition.
Endurance athlete, someone who's going to do the ascent or the full marathon, needs to have some storage carbohydrate in the form of glycogen in order to endure the whole event.
Glycogen, that's the body's carbohydrate. And in an endurance event as tough as this one, the more fuel you'll have, the farther you'll go.
What you can do with your diet is you can eat a real high carbohydrate diet. We call it carbohydrate loading for 3 days in advance of the event, and you can double or triple the amount of glycogen that you store in your muscles, and then you'll just be able to last a lot longer before you fatigue or again hit the wall.
While the run up the mountain may take hours, it's truly a waste of time and energy to eat during this race.
I think that it's wise not to eat while you're running up there. You want your blood to be going to your muscles, to providing oxygen to your muscles. And if you eat, some of that blood has to go to your stomach. That's less oxygen to your muscles.
And on the peak, oxygen is hard to come by.
It just seems to look up and think, wow, that's a long way up still. 2 miles usually is pretty short, but not today.
You know, when these runners have made it this far, it's more than carbohydrate loading that got them here. In fact, it's one heck of a lot of determination. For the Pikes Peak Marathon, I'm Kurt Sandoval, Sports 13.
Well, let's hope these athletes took Julie's and Kurt's advice, because they're going to need all the energy they can get to finish. Well, that for you right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to KRDO's exclusive coverage of the 1988 Pikes Peak Marathon Ascent. And on the Ascent race, we've taken the runners past the Cirque and past 16 golden stairs. Now it's time to find out who the champion is. After taking over command of the men's race at Barr Camp, Scott Elliott cruised to victory in the 1988 Ascent race. He crossed the finish line above the cloudless horizon in a time of 2 hours, 11 minutes, and 10 seconds.
Well, it's a hard effort, and it takes a lot of training, but I'm psyched.
Are you pleased to get 2 years in a row? You're #1 both years. It's got to be quite an accomplishment to be proud of.
Yeah, I am. I'm very pleased. I wanted this race really badly, so I've been training for months for this race.
Now Walter Sargent, who had battled Elliott for the lead for a good portion of the race, scratched and clawed his way past the rocks along 16 golden stairs for a second-place finish in 2 hours, 13 minutes, and 12 seconds.
I knew that Scott Elliott would be the one to beat, so I was pleased that I could stay close to him for as long as I did, and I realized that he would be real tough toward the end. Golly, I don't know. It's just completely exhausting. It's like no marathon I know of. It doesn't pound you down. It just makes you want to die.
Michael Tobin came in third, over 2.5 minutes behind Sargent. But unlike Walter, he was not pleased with his effort on the peak.
It was hard for me to gauge how good a shape I was in. I thought I was in better shape, a lot better shape than last year, but I just didn't feel it coming up today, so that's the way it goes.
Now with John Esquibel coming in 8th place, some 15 minutes behind Elliott, Scott charged ahead and captured the men's overall Triple Crown of Running title.
Yep, I was checking my watch, and I got it. I got enough time on Esquivel, so I've got it. I'm happy. I'm real happy.
With her husband cheering her on, Lynn Brown crossed the finish line in first place for the ladies with a time of 2 hours, 48 minutes, and 39 seconds.
I am just happy to have finished. I've been injured and just had to take the last week off and hike in elevation, but I think that resting helped. So I'm happy. I've run this race 3 times, and last year I bonked. I didn't eat and drink enough, and I was passed by so many ladies at the last mile.
Janie Day came in second in the Pikes Peak Ascent with a time of 2 hours, 53 minutes, and 2 seconds. Some 4.5 minutes behind Lynn.
Every time I run it, it's easier because you know where the level parts are, and you know if you start out slow, you'll finish better. And a lot of these women that don't have experience doing it, will start out too fast, and I think that's the key,
Now going into the Pikes Peak Ascent, Janie had a 5-minute lead over her nearest competitor in the Triple Crown of Running standings, and a 9-minute lead over Lynn Brown. And because Janie came in second in the Ascent by 4.5 minutes, she wins the Triple Crown of Running overall Ladies Championship.
Well, I kept thinking of the Triple Crown, so I knew the women that were in front of me. I was like 6th at Barr Camp, and I knew that the first woman was in the Triple Crown, and the rest of them, I knew they weren't. So I just wanted to get the first woman, but I never saw her, so the last mile, I just decided to take it easy,
Alrighty, now it's time to take a look at the top 5 finishers in the Ascent for the men. Scott Elliott was #1. Walter Sargent and Michael Tobin came in 2 and 3, as we said. In 4th was Boulder's Brent Friest, 2:21:51, good time for Brent. And in 5th, Andy Ames came in a time of 2:23:02. For the ladies, here's Rick.
Okay, we had Lynn Brown from Durango, Colorado in 2 hours 48:39, followed by Janie Day of Denver in 2:53:02. Debbie Brown came in third, followed by Pat Wasik-Hinson, and finally Lisa Mills in the top 5 in 2 hours 58:25.
Now, we can't forget about the average runners, the pack runners. They really make this race. Some of them love it, and some of them hate it, but they keep coming back year after year. Now, you may remember a couple of minutes ago when we interviewed some of the runners before the race, and they said, well, it'd be easy to get up the peak. They changed their mind after they ran it. The reason? Well, 13.4 miles uphill with an increase in elevation of 7,000 feet. Now, over 80% of the runners made it to the top, but not without some difficulty. For some, it was worse than for others.
It's the most horrible experience of my life, but I do it every year anyway.
Why do you keep doing it?
I enjoy pain.
I love this race. I love this mountain.
You can't stop running, you're still moving.
Yes, I know. I'm trying to warm down.
What is it like for the common man to run something like this? Describe for the audience what it's like.
I don't think the common man could be this crazy.
I love it. It's so beautiful. The scenery is wonderful. The people are great. The support is wonderful. It's just the most fantastic thing you can do.
Ran it 12 times. Some people would say you're crazy.
A lot of people do. Actually, this is the first time I've only done the ascent. I've done 11 round trips, and this is the first time ascent only. It's fantastic. All my friends back in California really think I'm crazy.
These runners keep coming back year after year. And why not? It's billed as the ultimate challenge, and indeed it is.
Oh, actually, I feel relieved.
Is it as difficult as you thought it would be? And kind of describe for the audience what it was like.
Actually, it's a really nice run to begin with, and I was enjoying it. It's my first time up. And then the last 3 miles were tough, and especially you see 2 miles, and it just seems you look up and think, wow, that's a long way up still.
But what about Helene Goody, who turned 31 years old on the peak? She says the older you get, the easier and friendlier the peak becomes. Well, almost. It's your birthday today. What's it like running up this hill?
Awful. Awful. But fun.
Happy birthday. She
Thanks,
loved it.
Thanks. No,
31.
it was fun.
She was hot.
Shh. Don't reveal my age. Challenge. And the older you are, the easier it is.
From the ascent, we'll move on to double the miles, double the grind, double the endurance, but double the fun. The 1988 Pikes Peak Marathon when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. Now it's time for the 1988 Pikes Peak Marathon. It's billed as the third oldest marathon in the U.S., but for beauty and pure difficulty, it may be the best.
This is certainly the most challenging course in the world, bar none. It's a fantastic course. Where else in the world can you go and see wildlife on a marathon course?
It's a great course. We had 6 crews, as we mentioned, up on top, getting all kinds of beautiful shots. It was a different type of morning than it was on Saturday. A little more cloudy, a lot of wind up on top. The wind chill was down about -3, gusts up to 50 miles per hour. And you can tell it's not a pleasant place to be on top of Pikes Peak. Here you see the runners starting to stretch out. What's the strategy here for stretching, Rick?
I think all you really need to do is make sure your muscles are loose. You don't have to run too much before this type of race. You want to just make sure you're loose before you start for the first mile.
And once again, the runners love this race.
You know, life doesn't need to stop at 65 with a rocking chair.
I think my life stopped at age 18.
You got a lot of time to start. I didn't start till I was 60.
Okay, what makes an individual all the way from Australia want to run up Pikes Peak?
Probably pure masochism and sadism of the highest order. That's about all.
Are you looking forward to it?
I'm looking forward to finishing, yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun finishing.
It's my first time, so I'm just hoping to get down.
I just kind of got used to doing it the last 10 years, so here we go again.
What makes someone want to run up and down a mountain that's 14,000 feet high?
I'd say something cliche like because it's there, but you feel very different after you've done it, okay? It makes a difference in your life.
And speaking of a difference, there was for the marathon, 615 athletes on hand as opposed to 1,500 on Saturday. It's a little more elbow room, Rick.
Yes, that's right, but these athletes are very, very high right now in the adrenaline, so they almost have to hold themselves back for the first mile.
Now, what's the difference in this race? Obviously, in the ascent, you're going up. In the marathon, you're going up and back. What's the strategy as far as taking off quickly?
Well, what you want to do is really relax for the first couple of miles of this race. Make sure you get warmed up properly before you start going up the hill.
Now, Matt Carpenter told us right there in second place right now, he really wanted to take off quickly. He wanted to go for the record. He starts out very quickly. This next shot, you'll see the fans on hand, but then he overtakes the Jackrabbit, and he sets the pace for the rest of the race.
Well, Matt knew exactly what he needed to do to get to the top of that peak, and nothing was going to bother him. He takes a look over his shoulder here to check this guy out. He's not concerned with him. He just wants to get to that bar trail to start running.
Now, as the lead runner, does it concern you as a lead runner to start off too quickly, the fact that you may not have enough gas to come back down?
Well, one of the big mysteries in the race is you don't know where second and third place are once you make a commitment early in the race. So you're always concerned about where they're going to be.
And Matt started out very quickly, as we've been saying. He has about a 1 to 2 minute lead coming up here on the pack, even over second place. So it's amazing he has the stamina to do this. He's trained a long time. He's trained for the past year. It was his goal, he said, to do this. As you see the pack runners there really slowly walking up the incline out of Manitou. You see Matt here at a full jog.
That's right. Matt has had some very good success this summer. He's won a couple of major mountain races in this region, so he knows exactly what he needs to do. There he goes, looking very smooth at this point.
We're at the W's with the switchbacks, and he's got a 1 to 2 minute lead here. He's really starting out very strong. His arms look good. He isn't looking back. He isn't concerned who's in second. All he's concerned about is Matt Carpenter. And coming up, you're going to see the second place man coming up here pretty quickly, Stanley Fox. Stanley has a unique style, but he's always a competitor.
Well, he's a veteran in this course, and he knows what he needs to do as well. These people have been up here, they've trained in the course before, followed by Tom Sobel there, who, by the way, is a pack burro racer, what he does in his spare time.
Well, Stanley's a lot of fun for our crews. He's always talking to us, always looking back, so it's fun to watch him race. And it's a good race right here, but he's got, Matt has an extremely large lead. It's got to be a little bit frustrating for Stanley.
Yeah, I think so, but I think he also is hoping that Stanley may have gone out a little bit too hard. Matt may have gone a little bit too hard, and hopefully he can catch him.
There's the leader for the women, Linda Quinlisk. She's a veteran of the Pikes Peak Marathon, so she knows exactly what she has to do to win this race.
Well, she's been on this course a few times, and she does know her strategy. She knows what she needs to do, and she'll take it out pretty easy and conserve her energy.
A lot of the runners were walking up the incline from Manitou. That's actually a smart move because you've got to come all the way back down. But it also costs you some time. The lead runners were running, so they're really the ones that are in shape. Here's the Pikes Peak Summit, 6 miles to go. It's a long ways to the top. Now we'll bring the runners out of tree line and go on to the Cirque. This is where the air starts to get a little bit thinner and the blood starts pumping a lot more. It's a tough place to run because you're up there with the clouds, you're up there with the sunshine and the blue skies. Once again, our crews did a nice job showing you exactly how difficult this is. It looks like an ant out there. It's not an ant. It's Matt Carpenter, who's taken along a big lead now. There's nobody that's going to catch him up to the top.
No, he's looking so good at this point. As I said before, he is very well prepared. You can tell his pace has slowed down considerably, but look at his face, completely relaxed.
No muscle tension there. He looks like he's ready to go, talking to our crews a little bit. He must have at least a 10-15 minute lead over Stanley Fox, who's in second here, and Stanley looks like he's hurting a little bit.
Well, Stanley is hurting. I think everybody hurts at this point, but you can see he's still running, and he's not walking, so that means he's got a lot of energy left.
Nice job there by our camera crew showing the distance between second and third and also in first. It's a big race up here. You've got an awful lot of things going against you. There's number one again. You've got a slippery field on a path. You also got low oxygen level. It's got to be tough.
There are a lot of things going, and one of the things is that you lose concentration toward the top. There's just not enough oxygen. You start losing contact with what you're doing, and a lot of times you just completely lose it. So these guys are very tough.
There's Stanley. Is it frustrating? He can see Matt Carpenter way up ahead of him, at least a 20-minute lead right now. Is that frustrating for him?
It can be very frustrating. One of the things he knows, though, he's got another half the race to go, so there's always the possibility that the lead runner could choke up.
There's third place right now, Sheldon Larson. Sheldon looks like he's in pretty good shape. He won it last year, but right now he's in third. He's got an awful lot of time to make up and distance to make up if he hopes to capture the 1988 marathon.
Well, he's very strong, and he's a veteran in this course, and he also knows that the first two guys could choke up a little bit.
16 golden stairs. You're getting very close to the top. You can see the top, but you're not quite there yet. It's got to be a little bit of a painful experience to do that, to see the sign and know that you're very close, but not quite to the top yet.
Well, anybody who's hiked some of the peaks around here will know that you see that false peak and you think, oh, geez, I'm almost there. but they see that peak and they miss it, so it's tough.
Now, Stanley's gained a little bit of ground there, and so has Sheldon, but it's tough because you're going up in the 16 golden stairs. The path has a lot of rocks in it. It's a lot more difficult. You've got to get your knees a lot higher, so it's very difficult. But here's the interesting point. There's the third place man, and there's the first place man. They're passing each other, so it's got to be very difficult for him.
Yes, it is, and you're really just test your race walking technique going uphill here.
Now, when you're up this high, the altitude, as we mentioned, is very difficult. It's something you've got to get used to, and Kurt Sandoval takes a look at that right now.
This is Dan Garcia, a former Adams State runner who finished 15th in the Ascent this year. One reason Dan is such an elite distance runner is because he trains at altitude. That's why those who don't run at heights may find themselves feeling very low during the Pikes Peak Marathon.
Because of the change in altitude, the oxygen content of the blood tends to drop to significantly lower levels, and that markedly affects just the metabolism of the muscle and causes a fatigue process to occur that normally wouldn't if you were at a level altitude.
So the higher the runner goes, the thinner the air. When these guys get near the top, they don't have much of a choice. Their bodies literally tell them to hold back.
To run well up something like this, your legs have to be in shape. My legs couldn't run fast enough to get my heart rate up even. So I was aerobically fit, but that doesn't do you any good when you're going up a hill. So it says that I needed to train more on mountains really to do well here.
Knowing that as they're running and getting nearer and nearer the top, that they perhaps have to slow down their pace, that they can't continue going at the same pace because they are going up in altitude.
This is truly one of the toughest parts of this race. Here the runners are, they can hear the crowds at the finish line. They're pushing, striving, yet the air is so thin, that's when they need to be aware of altitude sickness.
Symptoms are nausea, headache. You can in fact pass out, and you can get a fluid accumulation in the lungs. And collectively, those things are known as high altitude sickness.
That's why the best train at altitude. For the Pikes Peak Marathon, I'm Kurt Sandoval, Sports 13.
Now, we've taken the lead runners over the top of Pikes Peak. They're on their way back down. And at the top of Pikes Peak, there was an interesting change. Stanley Fox was number 2. He stayed up there to get some water. That allowed Sheldon Larson to come on and regain the number 2 spot.
I think psychologically Sheldon needed to take the lead right here, but actually, just to take a little extra water, I understand he had something to eat up there, really is not going to hurt you. Later on in the race, that extra fluid can really help.
I guarantee you if I was at the top, I'd be eating more than a little bit. Anyway, what's the strategy running downhill? Can you make up time coming downhill without hurting your body?
If you're a very good downhill runner, you can make up a lot of time, but you've got to be well prepared for that type of running.
There's Stanley after that stop. He looks a little more refreshed, a little more relaxed, and as usual, he's always stopping and giving a wink to the camera as he runs by.
That's right, and you can't get too excited at this point in the race. You have to really pace yourself, even going downhill.
Here's a good look up at the top. You see the runners struggling to get up there. In a second, you're going to see the women's winner, or make that leader right now, Linda Quinlisk. She's did a good job coming up at the slow pace at the top. She stopped to get a little bit of refreshment.
That's right, and again, that's a smart idea in this length of race.
Okay, you see Linda go up there. She stops for just 1 second. The altitude, as Kurt mentioned in his package, has to be affecting her. She gets a drink of water, stops for maybe a minute, drinks it, and she's on her way back down.
She looks real good at this point. You can tell she's aware of her surroundings. She's very gingerly stepping through the rocks there.
And here's a time lapse. Look at the distance. You're talking about maybe a 45-minute lead for the male winner, Matt Carpenter, who's already back down, coming back down it toward Barr with the water station there. He is flying.
Yes, he is, and he's very good control right here. He's not flailing his legs. He's looking very strong.
Back up to the top now for the women. That was Liz Britton in second and Gail Scott. Now, interesting here, too, Gail makes her way back down. Liz stops up here for a long time, and Gail comes right back down, so she takes the second place. So you have second and third, both for the men and the women, changing hands.
Yes, Liz did take some time at the top. She ended up 11th place, so she probably wasn't as well prepared as she should have been for this race.
Now, some people may wonder what's along her shoulders. That's a space blanket to keep her warm. You can tell here that Linda has a good lead on her now, and she's starting to pump it up going downhill.
Linda still looks very good, under very good control there.
There's a nice lead for Sheldon Larson in second place. You can tell the time difference between the ladies and the men now because Sheldon's going down toward Barr Camp, and here is Stanley Fox a good 20 seconds behind Sheldon right now.
Well, you can see how heavily muscled his legs are. Sheldon has a longer stride. He can really run very well downhill.
and more water stops. And of course, this is Matt again. Matt's coming way, way down. He's into the W's now, so he's got a very, very comfortable lead, but he isn't going to slow down because he wants that championship.
He can taste it right now. He knows he's got a commanding lead. There's not going to be any problem. All he needs to do is finish the race at this point.
That's got to be a little bit frustrating, especially for some of the runners who are still going back up the mountain. And a lot of those runners, surprisingly, are above the age of 50, and they are very special runners indeed. The Masters division is growing by leaps and bounds in the KRDO Triple Crown of Running. It's not uncommon to see 50, 60, even 70-year-olds challenging their bodies and the myth that senior status means slowing down. For 72-year-old Ed Sauer from Yuma, Arizona, and 78-year-old Bess James from San Jacinto, California, their senior years mean taking on Pikes Peak.
It's a wonderful thing, wonderful experience. It's from the health standpoint, from the physical standpoint, the mental standpoint. It's part of my life now. It's just a great experience. Being up there in that mountain every day, it's a peace that you don't find anyplace else in life.
Well, I tell you, it makes you feel so good. If you go out, say, for about a 6-mile run in the morning, you come back, you just feel like you can lick the world.
But does such strenuous running, as in climbing a 14,000-foot mountain, scare these senior citizens?
I've always said that every hour I spend running, I'll live that much longer. I don't care if I live any longer than that, but I don't lose anything by running.
I like challenges. I don't know what they are, and I don't know why I like them, but if there's something different comes along, I want to do it.
Now, Bess has only been running for 9 years, just about the same time span as Ed. For each, their lives have been enriched by picking up the sport, a new hobby which amazes friends and family alike.
People say, gee, I wish I could do that. And I says, can you walk? I says, get out there and walk. Just keep on moving. That's a most important thing. And as far as sitting down, I get up at about 5:30 in the morning. I never get to bed till 10 o'clock, and I never sit down. I'm gone all the time.
Well, there's an awful lot of time for most of the runners who are still headed up Pikes Peak. But the finish line is in sight for Matt Carpenter. Welcome back, everybody, for the finish of the 1988 Pikes Peak Marathon. You know, it's over 26 miles up and back, but the finish is well worth the wait. Well, it wasn't a record, but it was still a great effort by Matt Carpenter, who braved a wind chill at the summit of -3, plus 70-degree heat at the base of Pikes Peak, to win the 1988 marathon in 3 hours, 38 minutes, and 5 seconds.
It's been a long year of training. I'm really, it's still not soaked in, but it's been my ultimate goal for a year now. I went for the record, and I died, but I feel that's better than not trying. I went out really hard and paid for it up there, but I recovered on the downhill.
Defending champion Sheldon Larson was just about 9 minutes behind Matt as he cruised into the finish line in 3 hours, 47 minutes, and 8 seconds.
It was tougher today than it was last year, but I hung in there, so maybe I gave it a better effort, even though my time is a little slower.
Conditions in the peak were a little nasty this morning. What was it like?
It was cold and there was a stiff breeze blowing, which really held me back. But it was, it was clear and everything. It wasn't that bad, but just for the wind.
The third place finisher was Stanley Fox, who came in 3 hours, 51 minutes, and 47 seconds. And he said that pace was about as fast as the leaders could muster.
And we were talking back in the pack, Sobal and Sheldon and I, and we thought maybe we were going out a little too hot.
Yeah.
And we might lose it at 12,000 feet. But I decided then that it felt pretty good for me, so I held the lead to the top, but Matt was way ahead of me by the time I got there. So he had a good substantial lead at that point. Then I stayed a little bit up there at the top to eat watermelon, and Sheldon caught me and went on down, got sandwiched in between.
As for the ladies, Linda Quinlisk captured her second marathon title with a sizzling time of 4 hours, 29 minutes, and 59 seconds. Last year she placed second, so 1988 was very special.
Well, there's just a lot of good women runners, and I just am very grateful. It's something between me and the Lord, I think, and, He gave me the ability. And, I look at my daughter is hearing impaired, and I take her to a special school, and I look at some of the children, and I think, sometimes I feel sorry for myself when I'm sick and I can't race and everything, and then I think I'm so blessed, and I wish I could give this trophy to all those kids that I see.
Last year's champion and Linda switched places in 1988. Gail Scott couldn't quite catch Quinlisk. Scott strolled to the finish line in 4 hours, 32 minutes, and 22 seconds.
I did a great job. I'm so pleased. I really am. I ran my best possible race because I ran a smart race. I just came back from Switzerland where I ran in the European Mountain Race Championships. And to be second here a week later is just unreal.
So let's take a look at the top 5 finishers for the guys in the marathon. Matt Carpenter was number 1. Sheldon Larson was in 2. Stanley Fox came in 3. Paul Brennan with a good time of 3 hours, 52 minutes, and 15 seconds in 4th. And Tom Sobel in 5th, 3 hours, 54 minutes, and 13 seconds. For the ladies, here's Rick.
Okay, in first place, Linda Quinlisk with 4:29.59. Gail Scott in 4:32.22, followed by Kathy Britcliffe. Sharon Foster was 4th place. And in 5th place, Michelle Fletcher in 5:08.18.
Now, the average runners came back a little bit later, sometimes an hour later than the winners, sometimes an hour and a half or later, but they still enjoyed the marathon on top of Pikes Peak. Kurt Sandoval has their story.
What started in 1956 with just 13 runners has now grown to 615 of the toughest athletes you'll ever see. The Pikes Peak Marathon, it slugged America's toughest challenge. And to climb 7,000 feet, cover 13 miles, and still realize you're only halfway finished is mind-boggling.
Can't count on the mountain. It's going to do different things to you. It depends on the weather, it depends on how you feel, and you can go up there and feel great and have bad weather and do terrible. You can go up there with bad weather and feel great and do good. It's a totally different run coming down than it is going up. So I approach it from 2 different ways. I think as a race in 2 different portions. I run the race going up, then I get myself psyched up and run the race coming down. And you run them both totally different. You take shorter steps going up, coming down, you really stretch it out, and try to go for it and try to keep your time up.
Why do they do it? It's more than just a t-shirt. You see, this race attracts all walks of life from all over the country.
And I kind of come up here to race and enjoy the scenery because, it's not like running New York. New York's so ugly that you want to finish up as quick as you can. Or if you don't finish up quick, you might get mugged up there. But it's fun finishing up here.
Yes, anyone who finishes this race truly finishes America's toughest challenge. For the Pikes Peak Marathon, I'm Kurt Sandoval, Sports 13.
Well, when we come back, we'll wrap up the 1988 Pikes Peak Marathon Ascent. Welcome back, everybody. We've taken a look at the Ascent Champion and, of course, the Marathon Champion. Now it's time to recap the KRDO Triple Crown of Running individual champions for 1988. Rick?
And the winners this year were Scott Elliott of Boulder, Colorado, with a tremendous come-from-behind victory over John Escobel of Alamosa. In the women's division, Janie Day with a courageous effort. Janie's been injured for the last couple of weeks, and she wasn't even able to run very much for the last 2 to 3 days. And she won very, very easily.
Okay, we have to say thank you also to the 3 race directors for the Triple Crown of Running series. They could not come off without them. It's Dick Sudden, Fred Mays, and Carl McDaniel. And of course, we have to thank our production staff, headed by Tom Grinowich, and production director, I should say, Mark Terrace. We couldn't do it without them. And of course, the sports department, Kurt Sandoval, has been with us for all 3 shows. His help was invaluable. And of course, if you want to go to the award ceremony for the Triple Crown of Running this year, it's going to be held Wednesday night, September 21st at 7 p.m. at the Red Line Inn. And I almost forgot, we've got to thank one more person, our co-host, Rick Rojas. Rick, thanks for being with us this year. And did you have some fun?
I really did, John. This is America's most unique running event, and it was just great to be a part of this. I look forward to coming back next year.
Okay, we look forward to having you back next year for the 1989 Triple Crown of Running series. I'm John Glenn. Good night, everybody.